Okay, let's see. December 9, 2022, coming at you on the Frozen Ohana site. This is officially episode 4 of Kahua Kai, The Journey. And today's pace is going to be a little bit different because our guest today, I've never met. The other three I've met in the past, and Daniel's brand new, but welcome, welcome.
Mahalo, mahalo.
And his pace is going to be a little bit different also because his journey started differently from the first three people we interviewed. So, welcome, whoever's watching. My guest today, Daniel Rodrigues Molina. Um, and you filled me in that officially now you're using the last name.
So my last name right now is Toll. I'm in the process of getting my last name changed back to Rodrigues Molina because I feel that how would I explain it? It's my first it was the first name I had. My first name I had being born was Daniel Iocapo Rodrigues Molina. And I feel like I have a better connection with where I'm from as a Kanaka and where the culture and everything lies within me and where I feel like my life is headed. And I feel
And
like
you told me earlier that Toll is actually,
that is my legal last name.
but it's from where?
My father. That is my
Okay,
father's last name.
alrighty. So go over with us again. Then you officially, basically, genetically started off where?
I started off over in Maui.
Okay,
So I was born in Wailuku, same hospital. I mean, that most of us from Maui are born in, same hospital my mother was born in, my grandfather was born in. My mother is originally from Maui, and her mother is from Honolulu, and her father is also from Maui.
okay. And your
So
biological dad is from where?
my dad was born in Germany. He was born
Okay,
in Frankfurt, Germany. My grandfather on my dad's side, he was in the military at the time, and he was stationed over in Germany, and that's where my father was born. So they kind of met in the middle in Minnesota.
okay. So born on Maui, was there for how long before your first move?
I was about 9 months old when I moved from Pukalani.
Okay, and you
Yeah,
moved to
so
where at that point?
we moved to Rochester, Minnesota.
Okay,
Yep. So we stayed in Rochester for a little bit, but I mainly grew up more in the Twin Cities area, kind of in the Anoka County by like Blaine, Ham Lake, Anoka, Coon Rapids area, if you're familiar with any of those areas. Um, so I grew up and went to school over in Blaine and Anoka. I had a little bit of trouble kind of dating back to middle school and would kind of get into a lot of fights and things like that. Me and my brother got into it my junior year at school, and they ended up sending me over to Anoka High School at that point, which was my second time getting kicked out of Blaine. So I was a little bit of a troublemaker. I wouldn't say troublemaker. I had a temper problem that I had to work on. And so I kind of bounced around a lot. My mom, because I'm when my parents split up, my dad got custody of me and my younger brother. And so my mom bounced around a lot, kind of up north to Malacca, all around in the Twin Cities and St. Paul and Minneapolis area. She's now back in Rochester. When she had a brain tumor removed, she was out in California with her mother and stepfather. So I mean, we move around quite a bit.
okay. How many siblings do you have?
I have three, two of them half, one of them full. Um, but I see my half siblings more often than I see my full blooded brother. We kind of split apart a lot. He just recently came back from the Pacific Northwest. He was staying with our aunties for a little bit, our aunties and uncles over there. And he just recently came back. So his nieces and nephew are pretty happy about that.
Okay, that's awesome. So currently you live where?
I live in Blaine, Minnesota.
Okay.
Right in the Anoka County area north of Minneapolis.
So now spending the majority of your, I don't know, maybe toddler, elementary years living with your dad, is that correct?
Yep, I lived with my dad until he passed away when I was 15.
Okay.
And then I kind of moved around between his parents and my mom a little bit. So my dad, he didn't have a whole lot of independence for a little while there. He ended up getting his own place when I was about 9 or 10 years old, where it was me, my brother, and my dad. He had it for a few years, ran into some issues. My dad was an addict, and you know, ended up losing the place. He ended up dealing with some schizophrenia issues and things of that nature. And ultimately, the demons got the best of him. And after that, I ended up staying with my grandparents for a little bit until my mom got her own place again and got into a house instead of a regular apartment. And then
Hmm.
me, my brothers, and my sister and my mom got to be in one place, which my grandparents weren't too fond of that. My dad's dad, he was always kind of at odds with my mother for some odd reason. And so they always had a little bit of conflict. He kind of had an issue with it, but my mom's main goal was try to get us all under one roof again.
Okay.
And
So through the years living with your dad, can I assume that your exposure to Hawaiian lifestyle and culture was zero to limited?
oh man, very, very limited. Let's say, like, let me put it this way. I remember in middle school, I had to correct the office because they had my name wrong and they had my ethnic background wrong. They said I was Asian and they had my middle name as Alan. And I'm like, where do you get this? Where did you get it? I had to bring in my birth certificate and everything. And the most exposure I had growing up for the longest time was like Lilo and Stitch, and my mother telling me when I was 9 years old, your middle name is Io Kepa, and there's a reason for that. And she broke it down to me like, you're from Maui and you're the first of your generation on all sides of your family. And it's a big, important deal for us to know where you come from. And so I
Now,
always held
Iokepa
that
is Hawaiian
identity.
for Joseph, correct?
Yes,
Okay.
exactly.
So what's the
And I
connection
got
for
that
you?
from that was my great grandfather's name.
Okay. Awesome.
Yes. And my grandfather, my mom's dad, is the one who named me Daniel Iokepa. Um, which to this day, I wouldn't say it bothers me, but all the women in our family have all English first names and Kanaka middle names, where all the men have Kanaka first names, English middle names. So first of my generation, I got the Kanaka middle name, but the rest of the boys got Kanaka first names, and I'm like, what? How did this ordeal come about? So, but it's funny because a lot of the Ohana on my mom's side of the family, they call me Iokepa. They don't call me Daniel or
Okay.
Danny or
Cool.
Dan.
Yeah.
They call me Iokepa or Kepa, and they have a very strong belief that that's really my name, and I've always felt connected to that, and it's always been a big ordeal for me. So I had to do a lot of my own research for the longest time up until, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 years ago when I was introduced to the Frozen Ohana and really started getting connected a little bit, understanding kind of what the community is about, understanding more about the culture than my direct Ohana. Because even though I stayed with like my aunties from Maui when I was living in Washington with them, like I got exposed to a lot, but I couldn't make the direct connection all the time. And so once I got into the community of the Frozen Ohana, and I bless Matt for giving me a lot of tutoring and tutelage for a lot of different things. You know, he mentors me in like, hey, make sure you take care of the home first. When you take care of the home first, everything will fall into place. And shout out to Brada Kalani because he gave me a book of Nana Ike Kumu, you know, for practicing Ho'oponopono. And from that and just seeing all these different posts from other people in the community, it's allowed me to make certain things tangible of growing up, like no slippers in the hale. I grew up with that from my mom, and there was a big, I didn't understand the connection all the time, you know. And when I finally got to go to Maui when I was about 22 years old, my auntie Nikki, she goes, hey, I'm going back home for a little bit, and I will pay for your ticket back home if you can get to Washington and back. So I ordered that ticket, got to go to Maui, and got to meet a lot of the Ohana and see where we're really from. And being able to make everything tangible and seeing like all of my aunties, my cousins, my uncles, and everybody going up to the hale, and all of the slippers are outside. And I'm like, okay, this makes sense now.
Okay.
My mom was deadly with the slipper bra. Like my mom would be in the bathroom and my sister would be in the bedroom, and it's like almost like a Z shape. And my mom would throw the slipper at my sister for not brushing her hair and would make a double curve and hit her right in the face. And I was all like, I'm wondering where that's from. Well, it makes a lot of sense because a lot of the wahine are very deadly with them slippers, bro.
So from age 9 to age 22, you never made it back to Hawaii in that time period.
No, no. There was one opportunity where I could have possibly moved in with my auntie Nikki and Stacy guys over in Maui, or at least been able to have a chance where I got to talk to them and move out there. And I didn't take that opportunity. And I kick myself every day for it, but I think there was also a reason for it too, because I wasn't ready for it. I I probably would have got some dirty, dirty lickings.
So that first basic trip to Maui at age 22, were you prepared for pigeon?
A
Did you have
little bit,
trouble with
a little bit.
communication or okay?
Not really. So like my grandma Lisa, I didn't get to see her a whole lot. My mom's mom. She used to stay in California. She was big on getting her education and making money and things. And every time she would come and visit, you know, you can tell when she's mad. Her pigeon is very strong when she is mad. And so sometimes I'll pick on her and make fun of her a little bit, you know, and sometimes she just can't quit it, you know. It once it's in you, it's in you. Like it don't leave, you know. And so I got to hear a little bit of it, and they thought a lot of my cousin guys was trying to make fun of me, and I'm like, hey, I know a little bit about what you're talking about here. Don't play me for a fool now. I'm still from here too, and a lot of that stuff also comes from when I was born. I came out with white. I was super white, blonde hair and green eyes, and
Wow.
so everybody, yeah. So I was called Howdy Boy. I was a howdy boy for the longest time. And even when I go out there now, they still clown me because, yeah, I'm still lighter skin. You can tell I got some pigment, but it's so funny. Oh, howdy boy. Howdy boy. But when I first went out there, my auntie Nat pulled me aside and she goes, look, as much as we make fun and clown on that, she goes, you're Kanaka. This is home. This is where you belong. I'm glad that you finally got to make it out here.
Yeah.
And the mission now is to finally get out there myself and move out there, be part of the land, be part of the community, be part of our people, and teach my kids the same thing.
Okay. You
Because even
currently
though,
have kids?
yes, so I got one Hapa Howley who is a blood of mine, And then I got two others who are siblings to my daughter, but they are technically not of my blood. But due to a situation with their father, he's not in the picture. I didn't get to meet my daughter until she was about 7 years old, which was about 2 years ago.
Wow.
It was a
So they,
crazy situation back then.
so the three
Go
kids
ahead.
share a mother.
Yep. I'm with their mom right now, actually. We She had things that she dealt with addiction for a while, and honestly, I wasn't worth anything as a man or someone that was becoming of a man. So I can't blame anybody for any of the decisions that were made. And I've came to full forgiveness of that. Even though I missed out on those 7 years, I had to really learn what it meant to be a man in many different ways other than just providing monetarily or for financially,
But
you
you
know.
know, for me, it's an important part of these interviews to hear these things because each one of us takes a completely different journey through our lives to get from point A to point
Yes.
B. You know, you might have 30 stops. Some people only have two stops. So it's
Mhm.
as
And
long as there's
I'm
progress.
one of those guys who's got many. Yeah, exactly. I'm one of those guys who's got many, and I for a long time I've been very impatient. I'm still impatient to this day. I want things when I see things, I want it now. But a lot of these stops have forced me to be patient, and it's good because I've needed it. Because otherwise I'd get way too ahead of myself. Sometimes I'd get big headed, let pride get to me, and I really wouldn't learn anything. I would, just go by thinking I knew everything. And it's really sat me down and forced me to learn. I remember the biggest thing that I regret to this day when I went back out to Maui when I got back home is me and my auntie Nikki. It was probably like 5 in the morning, and she's like, "Hey, we're going to Hana. Let's go. We're going to Uncle Jimmy's." And I was like, "Oh, okay." I hop in 5 a.m. You know how they probably how the locals drive on the Hana Highway. They go woo 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 woo, and she's like, "I hope you don't get car sick." I'm just like, "No, just don't go off the cliff, auntie." But we go to Uncle Jimmy's, and they were working on planting kalo and things, and they were getting all in the mud and stomping in there and things like that, and I didn't participate. And I look at it as a very big learning point and one of my bigger mistakes in life, because I really learned what it meant to be a Kanaka after I missed that opportunity. Just in regards to community and everybody pitching in and everybody being part of the table and everybody playing their part. And granted, I was at that point I was a guest, but that was also home. I should have took that opportunity to do that. It would have shown a lot more to Uncle Jimmy and everybody else around that I took our culture and our way of life a lot more serious.
Now,
And so
obviously, you have had time to look back on it. Why do you think you didn't participate?
a lot of it culture shock. As soon as I landed, I felt this different kind of quietness and peace. There was a certain piece of me that always felt kind of missing. And as soon as we landed in Maui, like even when we got to Honolulu to the airport, just the air and everything, it was familiar, but it was so different. It was a smell that I would smell throughout my childhood, but never knew what it was. And then I landed in Honolulu. We got in the plane and got to Maui and met my auntie and my grandma, and they gave me the lays and everything and said, "Welcome home." And everything, it was a different kind of overwhelming. It was so overwhelming, but it was nothing anxious. I felt okay. I felt like I belonged. And I've never felt that before. Growing up, my dad's side of the family, My grandfather, he's a good man, and honestly he follows a lot of our values too. He's big on community and ohana and trying to build something within our community in ohana and learning how to provide. And but he used to get on my mom a lot every time he my mom would speak Spanish or would speak Olelo, any of that, because my grandfather goes, we speak English in this house, even though he would also speak German. And so there was always that little bit. And over time, like when I went to go to Maui, I was like, yeah, I'm getting to go back home and things and da 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 da. And I will never forget when he goes, well, go back there, like you're not Hawaiian, you're Minnesotan. I was like, then you missed the big picture. And over time, as I've been more introduced to the culture and subtly bringing it to him as well, he's starting, I feel like there's a little bit of different of change in him. Like, just a lot of this makes more sense. He used to have a good relationship with my mother's dad because they used to communicate, considering that I came back from Maui and my both of my grandfathers wanted to make sure that me and my mom were okay and everything. So they would communicate. They had a great relationship. They had a great understanding of family and values, and they were very similar. But I felt that maybe certain ways that he experienced over time that he thought he had to exit out because maybe I had too many options, so to say. And he wanted me to be successful and focus on a certain road, and I didn't know where I wanted to go. I didn't know who I was, in my opinion. To this day I kind of struggle with identity, but through therapy and through the community of the Frozen Ohana and just communicating with people and bring it about to my Ohana now with my woman and my Kiki, they not only do they accept it and are excited every time something new is brought to the table and what we learn. Like I will speak a little bit of Olelo, like I'll be like, oh, aloha kakayaka every morning. I want to try to make it more prominent in their lives. Like this is not just who I am, but this is part of what we are. And so with them being accepting of it and other people being accepting of it and learning more about it, it's allowed me to educate not only myself but other people around me.
Cool.
And
Very
all of
cool.
those people all of those people just everybody I know says that they feel so connected to our culture. And it makes sense because in a lot of ways, this is where we come from all as a people and how we started. We were just able to maintain some of this even throughout some of the oppression. And it's honestly very, how would I say, I wouldn't say surprising or exciting. It's a little bit more than that because when things like speaking our language and practicing our culture was banned, we were still able to pass that on and now going through a renaissance. And now so many people want to learn and be part of the community. There's also a lot of people who want to use it for their own benefit, like monetization and appropriation, but I feel like that it's also a, I wouldn't say a good thing, but it's also very humbling to be like, hey, you like our culture enough to where you feel like you can get something out of it. And hey, okay, even if you don't practice our culture and appropriate this or try to monetize it or anything like that, like it gives me a chance to educate other people because other people still come to me like, oh, what do you know about this? Or like, for example, with Mauna Loa going off, that I got people asking me about things and this and that. And it's like, it gives me a different sense of fulfillment where I can provide something for our culture and our community because that's my main thing. I want to be able to provide. And for the longest time, I haven't been able to provide in many ways. I've had to learn how to. And my biggest one is not trying to get connected more with our culture. And how can I get more connected with our culture? how can I provide for our culture? And first, what I've had to do is sit back. I've had to learn, and I still have to learn more before I can educate more. But I feel like being patient, sitting back, acquiring this knowledge from people who actually have the right knowledge, not just some social influencer on TikTok or anything like that, because we know how some of them go, but people within the community. Like with the Kumu here in Minnesota, she's a wonderful woman. I love her. I haven't been able to go to hula and practice hula because I've had to worry more about the home as of late. But I still make it a priority once everything is right to go back to hula and start practicing every week.
Right on.
It's part of our culture. We have to learn how to provide in many different ways. And if I can't play my part, then it's time to I gotta sit back and wait until I can play my part.
Do you know Jerry Freitas?
I do not.
Okay. Well, let me ask you, you talk about the home and making it all right there. Currently, what's your career up in Blaine?
Right now, I have just recently upstarted again my career in insurance. So my biggest thing over the years, because I've been sick with a cyclical vomiting syndrome for 10 years, very debilitating. Like I would go to work and every 2 weeks to 3 months, I was in the hospital
Wow.
and nobody could figure out why. You know, maybe it's because I smoke too much paca at times. But overall, that's what they tried to blame it on until I almost died in 2020 in November because I had a deal with rhabdomyolysis, which is like a muscle like dying and excreting a protein called myoglobin. It's like when you go to the butcher shop or the meat market or anywhere that deals with meat and you see the meat and it looks like blood or whatever, or at least the kids will be like, oh, it's bleeding, it's bleeding. Well, it's myoglobin, it's the protein, it's the muscle dying. And what will happen is it goes into your bloodstream. And when it gets into your bloodstream, it gets into your kidneys and your liver and it toxifies them till the point where they shut down.
Wow.
And so CK levels are normally between 0 and like 300, really high at 5,000. Mine was shutting down and everything at almost 200,000. They had to put me in the ICU. They had to put me to sleep because my brain was swelling. I was starving to death. I was so dehydrated because I couldn't keep anything down for over a week. And so I was having seizures and these things that I was breaking out of my restraints that they had me in because I kept getting up. So that's when they put me to sleep for like 3 days. And they started putting me on a medication. What was it? Gabapentin. They started putting me on gabapentin and things started getting a lot better. Well, eventually I was talking to my doctor and then they said, well, you have fibromyalgia. So they started giving me Lyrica. And I haven't been in the hospital since. So that's a positive. But because it's been so debilitating, I've had to try to find other ways of finding a way to earn some money. Because for the longest time, I haven't had an income. I can live without an income. I know how. I've had to learn how to provide and be able to survive without an income. And the only way I've been able to do that is learning how to provide in other ways than financially within a group of people in a community who can help support me in ways I can help support them and that we all can keep going. And so it ended up bringing me to learning about keeping or obtaining, keeping, and spreading wealth. And so I started learning about life insurance and health insurance. And now I deal with supplemental insurance and group insurance and life insurance as I'm contracted with AFLAC.
Awesome.
So right now I'm contracted with them, learning the game a little bit, trying to get some clients under my belt and try to figure out how the entire game and how the scheduling and everything else works. And then as I do that, I want to get other contracts with other insurance companies so I can provide a lot more different types of insurance products for anybody else looking for it. from major medical, supplemental medical, different life insurance policies. That way I can help people build estates long term and how to keep it within their family, how to reduce the amount of taxable income that they have. You know, I've been very, very big on that. So now I'm just doing supplemental insurance, working on getting into smaller businesses, local businesses, and trying to work with them and their employees to get them set up. It's kind of more like gap coverage rather than major medical.
It's awesome, and it's got to be a productive field once you get good at it. So because people out there
Exactly.
have needs, you know.
Exactly. And I feel like with a lot of us Hawaiians, it's like my ultimate goal, what I would love to see is for us to get our kingdom back. I feel like we were done horribly wrong, especially for what we were recognized in 1848 and what has happened since. And it really bothers me to this day that us as a people are still not recognized in the way that we should be. And I'm hoping that if we can find a way to obtain, keep, and spread wealth within our families and our communities, maybe we have a chance of getting our land back, getting our power back, and getting our influence back. And I feel like right now is almost a perfect time considering that we have a cultural renaissance going on. And
Yeah,
so if we
yeah.
can learn how to come up with spreading our culture and learning the ways of how to come up within the game that has been set up, if we can beat them at their own game, we can set up our own playing field for our own people. And so I'm trying
Now,
to.
your life in Blaine, going through, I don't know, maybe like junior high, high school.
Mhm.
Did you ever run into any other Hawaii people?
Very few. There was one that me and my brother grew up with. There was one of my brother's buddies. He was a Hapahali as well. His father was from somewhere in Hawaii, but they didn't practice the culture a whole lot from what I could tell. I didn't have a very strong relationship with them, but I knew that he did have some Hawaiian in him. I mean, hell, you could look at him and see some of the facial features and bone structure. I'm like, hey, I can equate that to some of my cousins and uncles and whatnot. You gotta have something. So I ran into very few, and that's what disappointed me most growing up. I was part of a program in middle school and high school called the Excel program, and it was for a lot of minorities who had um different attachments to different places. So if you were born outside of Minnesota or outside of the US, you had a different ethnic background that you're really close to. They'd bring you in, and I wouldn't say it was like an interview process. It was more of, hey, this is what we have to offer as a program. Would you like to join? And they brought us to things like a lot of different college tours. They gave us all sorts of different resources with different counselors throughout the schools. I mean, I went from middle school to high school, and as soon as I went to high school, I knew like 4 or 5 different counselors there, knew who I needed to speak to at the Excel program. I mean, there was times where I got to leave certain classes, go to certain Excel programs and meetings and different like um public speaking programs and things like that. And sadly, there was nothing about Hawaii or nothing Hawaiian or anything, but I got to see a lot of different kinds of people and got to see that I'm not the only diasporatic person or people out there. There's a lot of us. And if I kept going with some of these programs, I thought that maybe I'd find something for me. I never did, but it helped me get through middle school and high school when I had a lot of troubles going on for sure.
Now, a little bit of education, because when you used it bef- before when we talked in the last week or so, I
Mhm.
had to go look it up. What is diasporatic?
So it's kind of like, from my understanding, it's because I haven't necessarily looked up the exact word, but from how other people used it and from my understanding of the word, it's like, so I'm from Hawaii and I am now, so to say, displaced. I'm in a different place. I didn't get to grow up around my culture, but I still have a certain tie and emptiness that isn't fulfilled until I get to be part of that again. That's the best way I could explain it and how I've understood it.
Well, I like the word, and after I looked it up, you're basically along the correct lines. And so basically, all of the people, primarily in the frozen Ohana, who currently live on the mainland, are to one extent or another diasporan.
Exactly.
Some may have stronger ties, some may have weaker ties, but they're all displaced, disconnected. You don't have that daily influence that helps you maintain a culture.
Exactly. And thankfully with my mother, she had kind of weak ties to the culture too because she when my grandparents split up, they were in California as my grandfather was stationed in California in the military. And my grandmother ended up leaving my grandfather and came to Minnesota. Um, I can't say for the exact reason, but I know that my grandmother wanted to get an education. And eventually, what happened is my mom was put in the foster care system. And that's kind of where my grandmother got her education through that time. And my mom was staying in Rochester, Minnesota with a different family under a foster family and things. And that's kind of where they met my dad. And that's kind of where everything came into the picture long term. But my mom didn't get a whole lot of influence of our culture and such. But the things like no slippers in the hale, that was a big one. Some of the food, my mom, what was it? My mom loves Kahlua pork, and so obviously we couldn't dig a hole, we couldn't dig a big old puka in the backyard or nothing, and cook it underground. But we all have our own ways of mocking it, and so my mom would make that a lot. I love Kahlua pork; that's one of my favorites, but very few things I didn't even know were connected to the culture. And I feel like if I were if I were still living in Maui, like my mom was given a chance to, like, hey, why don't you go pursue your education and we'll keep Iokepa here with us and you can come visit whenever you want. Instead, my mom took me with and wanted me to meet my dad and things like that, and said that I'm gonna take this chance and do what I can with it. Which I gotta give my mom a lot of props because it takes a lot of bravery and courage to do something like that at 16 years old.
Yeah,
You know?
definitely.
So there was a lot of influence that I didn't know that there still was. And growing up, not knowing it, and then finally getting to Maui or living with some of my aunties and uncles over in Washington, it's like, wait a minute, I do know how these things work. You guys act just like how my mom do. Well, there's a reason for it. So it wasn't a whole lot of influence, but there was a little bit. And my dad, he didn't know a whole lot about culture, but my dad still tried. Like, for example, when Lilo and Stitch came out in theaters, he made it a very big deal for us to go because there was still Hawaiian influence in it. Like the hula dancing and everything and some of the music. And it I got to give my dad props for at least trying where he could for the limited amount of resources and a limited amount of things here in Minnesota at that time. I got to give him props for it. And it kind of gives me the motivation to show not just my daughter about our history and our culture and stuff, but her siblings as well, because her siblings, their family comes from the Middle East over in Jordan, over in the
Oh,
Palestine
okay.
area. And their grandfather is actually from that area. And as we know about generational trauma and things of that nature, they have the same kind of ordeal. Their land has recently been taken too, and there's a lot about language that is, very looked down upon, with Arabic and stuff here in the States. but I still going to make it a point to learn at least as much as I can to teach them about their own culture and background because it's important, you know.
Now, the half siblings, are they younger than your daughter?
Um, yes, my daughter is the oldest. She's the oldest of her generation too.
And if I remember correctly, you said she's about 7.
She is 9 years old now. She turns 10 in
Oh, okay,
May.
okay.
Yeah, so I met her at
Has
7.
has she been to Hawaii yet?
No, right now I'm still quote unquote trying to get them house trained. So when we go to Maui, it's like, hey, you know the rules here. For example, I always get on them, no slippers in the hale. I get on them all the time. Hey, it's winter time out here, so I understand we're not gonna leave our stuff outside. Leave it by the door, at the very least. You know what I mean? Just little things like that. I'm trying to get them in the framework of these are how things go over there. That way they're not going over there and getting shocked or possibly offending some of our people or our ways. I'm trying to get them to understand different ways of life, so to say, before we do that. Not necessarily like, oh, they're going to offend somebody and now they're going to get dirty lickings. Obviously, they're kiki, like you can only hold them to such degree, but I'm trying to, especially with my daughter, trying to teach her certain things. That way, when she goes out there, she can be a proper representation of not what I am learning and what she is learning, but what we are as a people. Because one thing I'm trying to get her to understand is, hey, you also represent us. How do you want us to be represented? There's a certain way we want to be represented, but how do you want to represent that? Make sure that it's Pono. You know, I every single day make sure what kind of day you guys gonna have. We're gonna have a good day. Make sure you guys stay Pono every single day. Get them in the frameworks of it and not just the language, but what it means behind it and the ways of it. And but it's definitely a priority of getting her home and seeing what it's like out there. A lot of Ohana are very excited to meet her.
That's very cool. Living life in Minnesota, what do you do for recreation?
Well, to be honest, I don't do a whole lot at this point in time. A lot of it, I try to do a lot of studying and education and just trying to work on my craft right now in the insurance game. Um, I try to spend time with my kids as much as possible, even if it's just kind of hanging out a little bit. I do a lot of cooking. I love to cook. I smoke a lot of foods. It may be 3 degrees outside. You best believe this weekend I am out there smoking a rack of ribs. So I
That's
love to
very
smoke
cool.
food and make cook. I like to cook food. I watch a lot of football. Football has been one of my things since I was young. And one thing that's nice is seeing in our culture, we're big on football as well. So that helps too. Growing up watching guys like Troy Polamalu and right now being a Vikings fan, seeing guys like Eric Kendricks out there representing the Polynesians, like I'm always repping for that. Tua over in Miami. I've been a big Tua fan since he was in college. I'm like, that's my guy. That's my guy. You're not a Miami fan. He's Polynesian and from Hawaii, bro. I don't care. I rock with anybody from Hawaii. Like, go ahead. Yes, let's do that. Um, let's see. I play video games, but that's been kind of cutting off as much. I've been trying to cut the video games out. I look at that as more as a distraction nowadays. And I'm trying to eliminate the amount of distractions I have so I can stay productive and be a better father, a better man. You know, uh, it gets in the way of me being able to provide. So a lot of that, I've been trying to cut out. But one thing I'm big on is music. For the longest time, I wanted to play guitar, but my grandfather ended up giving my brother a guitar one year and goes, well, he wanted it more. Well, let's just say my brother gave up after about a year, and here I am 10, 15 years later, still writing my own music and things. And
It's
ended up
awesome.
turning into more raps, but like it started out with poetry. I used to write poetry when I was a teenager, like when I was in middle school and I was going into high school. One of my buddies was like, well, why don't you throw a beat on that? It has a nice flow to it. See what you can do with it. And over time, it's just became a regular ordeal. Sometimes I'll find something and get inspired and start writing on something. But when it comes to music, I started to look at it, how can I use it to be part of my influence if it's any good? How can I still how can I provide to my mission? How does this provide to my mission? And so what I'm doing now is I'm starting to come up with different projects that I'm trying to put together right now and kind of put it together with everything else. So like with music and insurance, I could just about go anywhere and make a sales pitch or make a business deal or perform somewhere. Go to the studio, make some music, things of that nature. Um, and so I try to make my lifestyle and my income not necessarily what I am, but as something that I do. I just sell insurance. I make music, but that's not who I am. It's just what I do. And so what I've been doing is kind of correlating everything that I do from making food, making music, doing insurance and things like that. How can I bring it all together? So right now, what me and my buddies are doing is I got a lot of inspiration from on Hawaiian plates. I worked with Chef Warren and Jess for a little while. I worked in the kitchen with them for a little bit. I helped them with a pop up once, and going in there working in the kitchen with Chef and Jess, just us three, just kind of getting things going because they had to do some deliveries. And I was brought onto the team one time and I got really inspired with the way that they do things. And so what me and my buddies are thinking about doing, one of my buddies who is an executive chef, Duke's on 7th off of Highway 7. I hear he makes a killer loco moco, by the way. So feel free to stop in by there, shout out to Alex Reed there, putting on for the culture. um, but what we've been thinking about doing is kind of coming up with our own little plate pop-up. I like to smoke ribs and stuff, and I always have rice on deck. I always have rice. We're a big rice family. I always get the 50-pound bag of rice all the time. And so what we're thinking about is, why don't we smoke a few racks of ribs or go out and say, hey, I'm making this day. Send a payment or whatever, and I'll deliver you a plate. We're thinking about smoking some ribs, adding some rice, and if you want to upgrade to mac and cheese, like a smoked mac and cheese, and then do like a corn on the cob or something like that, maybe a mac salad or something, and kind of anywhere from 10 to 20 bucks, depending on how big of the plate. Maybe do some kids' plates. And with that, there was a song I was working on that kind of ties into making food. And so we were thinking about making a music video with that at my buddy's kitchen. And at the end of the video or in the beginning of the video, Keppa's ribs, contact at this info, da 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 da. Maybe do some screenshots of the seasonings that I use and maybe try to get some sponsors or something. I don't know. But I try to put it all together and also do it in a way that represents our culture, but also not just our culture where I come from the rest of my background too. I know foods and whatnot. My grandfather on my dad's side of the family grills and smokes every day of the year. Doesn't matter if it's a huge blizzard outside, he's shoveling out there every couple hours and smoking that food and on the grill. And so I learned a lot from him, and I tried to tie everything together. So these ribs I'm trying to make has this stuff called this bone sucking sauce. It's a seasoning in the sauce. And I'm using the seasoning, and man, that seasoning is so savory. I love it. One of my favorite seasonings. But what I'm going to do with it is also make a guava barbecue sauce because I love guava. And I think a lot of us like guava as well. So do something like that and try to tie everything together, as I said, and not just as hobbies or what I do for recreation, but just part of making it part of my lifestyle. It's just something I do, you know?
Sounds good. Let's see. So we know about your trip to Maui when you were 22. Was that basically your last trip to Hawaii, or have you been
That was
again since?
that was my first and only trip I've taken.
Okay. How long did you
That's
spend there?
that we spent about 10 days there.
Okay.
A little shorter than we wanted to. I got to see my uncle Ikaika graduate high school. And
Awesome.
so that was nice. I got an uncle who's younger than me. So we got to pick on each other a little bit. Oh, yeah, you respect your elders. Oh, yeah, for sure. Sure thing, nephew. But I got to see him graduate and got to see some of that stuff. And that was a blast. I mean, hanging out in my auntie's garage, we're shooting pool, just partying, you know, and just having a good time, being pulled aside and, hey, check out this giant cockroach, bro. Have you seen one of these before? I won't forget. I went to go take a shower after one night of partying with these guys. And my auntie goes, everything here for the shower, da da da. Go ahead, do your thing. Okay, cool. It's about 2 a.m. And I start the shower. Thankfully, no Jackson chameleons or nothing like that are in there, like what happened to my mom when she was pregnant. But I got done and I went to go open the cupboard to go get a towel, and I seen this big thing crawling on the side of the wall. It looked at me, fluttered its wings, and hissed at me. And I slammed it shut, and I was like, oh, just, whoa, and I just froze. I woke up the next morning and everybody was laughing at me, and they're like, haha, screamed like a wahine, brah. You see the giant cockroach in there? I'm like, oh, you don't you start, brah. Don't you start. So I got to see some of them things, got to get clowned on a little bit, got to be picked on a little bit. Oh, howdy boy. Have you seen one of these yet? My uncle was giving me fish liver because he went fishing, and he's like, hey, brah, making some poke, but other than the poke, have you had fish liver? Here, come and try it. He was trying to get me all try it, trying to get me to try all sorts of things, just trying to mess with me. Like, you go and try this. Like, okay, that's too far now. I know you don't eat that. Don't try me. But yeah, it's been my only time since I've been out there, and it's kind of a regret of mine so far. Obviously, it's expensive, but it's important to me, and you got to make the things that are important, you got to make those things happen.
Yeah, you
And
gotta
I
set a
had
goal.
Yep, and I haven't made that happen, but I'm doing a lot of goal setting a lot more the past couple of years, starting to get on my feet a little bit more, and hopefully one day I'm able to go out there, have my place with my kids and my woman, and you know, be able to provide to our people. I don't want to try to get too much in HOA or anything like that, but if I have to, then I have to. But I want to do it besides of from I mean, I can't sit here and say that they're separated or say that they're not separated, but the entities of like HOA and the United States government, they're still pretty intertwined. And at times I still struggle with, what is the Hawaiian way? Would my ancestors be okay with me taking this route to do this? Or am I making a deal with the devil here? And so I think about that a lot. Which way am I going to take to get there? Because I want to be able to be recognized as a Kanaka with through like an ID card or something. But at the same time, I understand that the program in place is something that they also did to the Native Americans. And being in Minnesota, growing up in Minnesota, there's a lot of Native Americans out here that I got to grow up around. And I've learned a lot about what has been done to them and what still happens today. And so I recognize some of these systems and like, do I want to give those guys that kind of power? Or do I want to try to use it and try to flip the script on them? And it's hard to say because I don't know what my ancestors or what our people would be okay with. And especially because there's a lot of strife within that part of our community at times. And it's understandable. But
it takes listening and it takes understanding. So
exactly. And I want to do it the right way. I want to build the right foundation, because a foundation that's built on glass, something that's thrown at it it's gonna fall apart. So I'm very big on building a very strong foundation and adding to that strong foundation with more strong add-ons in place. That way, if something happens, it's still there. It's built strong. I want to find more unity, more stability, more of a stronger foundation. And if I can find a way to provide that for us to do that in a more efficient manner, that's the route I'm going to take.
It was before we started recording, so the audience hasn't seen it yet, but share with us who you're repping today.
Oh, the Frozen Ohana, brother.
There
Yep.
you go.
I got the 20th anniversary shirt. I got that from, shout out to Matt. He's given me a couple of things for prizes. And, I did an interview with with a guy and part of Boss Body Entertainment. He's part of a guy named Trayvon. And he was somebody who, when I went and did my first show, he really liked my music. He really wants me to put music out, was really into it. And him and his wife went to their honeymoon over in Maui and went to a museum and was going around and trying different foods and trying to learn about our culture a little bit. And I hit him up. I was like, dude, that's awesome. Like, for all Polynesians, that's respect. I appreciate that. And he goes, as an African American, I want other people to recognize and respect ours. So I have to respect others and learn and find things that I wouldn't have otherwise while I'm out here. And he was like, look, we're starting to do interviews and a podcast and stuff. Why don't I bring you on and we can kind of share some things, And so I was invited to go on to Boss Body Entertainment's to Trayvon's Trey and Bay's podcast is what it's called. And after that interview, Matt gave me a shout out and sent me a Hawaii plate with Kepa on it, and Matt has shown me a lot of love since I've joined the community, and I appreciate that a lot. He's given me a lot of opportunity to be part of the community, even while I'm stepping back and trying to take care of home, and if things like this can help our community or things like this can be part of the community or it's looked at as providing, I am more than happy to do so.
That's awesome. Awesome. Well, I want to just say thank you so much, Daniel. Mahalo nui. It was great for you to share your journey. It's an interesting journey. It's very different, one of a kind, but in a sense, I guess all of our journeys are, but yours has a pretty high level of uniqueness to it.
It's a hard thing that I had to accept over time, and mahalo nui for having me on here and giving me the opportunity to, share my story, to represent for our people, represent for the Frozen Ohana,
Right on.
Just thank you. I greatly appreciate it. It means a
Yeah,
lot.
and I look forward to getting to meet you in person.
Yes, no doubt. Hopefully we have another pop up or have another get together soon. And I can't wait to meet you in person. Can't wait to meet everybody in person, man. So
awesome. Aloha again, Daniel.
Aloha, mahalo nui. You take it easy now.